Welcome everyone to this episode 11 with our hero and our dear friend as well, Zachary Lieberman. And thank you so much for joining. I mean, it's amazing that you're here. And first of all, I wanted to tell you guys why we're doing this. And everything started because after everything like COVID happened, we were asking a lot of friends, what are you going to do? Like what are your fears? What do you think we should do next? And there was like a very nice conversation that happened between those people that were sharing their stories, and we were saying like, hey, maybe we should share that with more audience and with the people. Why we don't do this as a live interview sessions with everyone? So like the day after everything started, we also start doing these sessions, and we have been doing this you know almost every week, from time to time, when we can't do it again as well, because it's kind of something that we do in the time that we have available as well. And well, thank you so much for joining us today, Zach Lieberman. And the first thing that I'm going to say is that you have to forgive me about my English, because it's not my main language. So I'm going to try to do the best that I can.
Mhm.
And also have to excuse this with the rest of the audience. And after doing this, first of all, Zach, I wanted to tell you that I wanted to say thank you, not only for this talk, but for your contribution to the community, because one of the reasons that myself and most of the people that probably are here are making a living out of this is because they're starting to use your tools, your code, your creativity, your inspiration. I remember that I saw, or that I met more about you when it was like 2006. I think it was a off festival in Barcelona.
Mhm.
And if I can say a moment that changed my life about making things with art, code, and that kind of stuff, I could say like that was the specific moment in time in my life that changed something in me. And
Mm.
in you, on the closure with Golden Levin, making this closer for the festival, it kind of completely, you know, changed something in my brain and said like, one day I want to be in that stage. One day I want to create the stuff that those guys are doing. So thank you so much for that. So I wanted to say that publicly, and I want
Mm.
to share this moment with the rest of the audience, because I don't know how much I can express to say thank you to you, because the reason you exist is the reason that I have work and I can maintain my family, and then there's a lot of people that are working, and I start doing work with that. So thank you so much for that, and I really
Thank you. That's really kind. That's very sweet. I Yeah, I remember that performance. That was really crazy. It was 2006. 14,
like,
yeah, 14 years ago. Oh my God.
yeah. So well, you already have their Instagram, but there's people in Facebook that doesn't know much about Zach Lieberman work. I really recommend you to go and take a look to his Instagram account, because it makes really amazing artwork, and you should do it. Like, you should follow him right now. Okay, like, let's start. So after this brief introduction and brief thank you to you,
Thank you.
let's start with the session, and we're really excited for this moment. And the way we do it, like normally we start with this kind of like interview, and you
Hmm.
share with us anything that you want to share with us, and
Yeah.
please do it. We'll be happy to see what you want to show us. And at the end of the session, we will have like another 10 minutes to to ask to the audience a bit more of some specific questions. But I'm going to start with the most basic questions of all about when does Zachary Lieberman begin his journey about making, work with code?
Mm. This is a good question. So I studied fine art. I was studying printmaking. I was really happy. I spent all my time in the printmaking studio, and I was just really, really happy as an art student. But I had to get a job, and everybody was talking about web design and Y2K, and the world is going to end in the year 2000. And um, and my friends were getting jobs in these web design studios. So I kept applying. I started applying for jobs, and I didn't have any portfolio. Usually you would have a design portfolio. Like you go to design program, you have a portfolio. And I would show up to these interviews and I had slides of my paintings. I didn't have any background. I didn't have any experience with software. And somehow I got an internship that turned into a job, and at this company that was really busy, and I learned all this stuff. I learned Illustrator and Photoshop and Quark. And I discovered that you could go to the bookstore, to Barnes & Noble, you could get a $50 book. It was about this thick for anything, right? You could get a book for Photoshop and a book for Illustrator. And I would literally just like carry the books in my backpack, and I would go in the morning, like at lunch, I would hide and like look things up in the books and come back in the afternoon and fix things. And I discovered Flash. So probably usually when I give a talk, I'm like, who remembers Flash? And like, increasingly less hands going up in the air, but it was a really important tool because it was a tool for doing animation and animation on the web. And the crazy thing about it was it just was such a nice interface, the timeline and keyframing and these sorts of things. But then also there was this scripting side of Flash and the idea that you could write code. And I fell in love with Flash. I was experimenting, and I'd always loved animation. I didn't know how to do it. I never went to film school. You can make flip books and stuff and do sequences, but I never felt like I could make something move. And here was this tool that was all about motion. And not only that, you could take a keyframe and you could write a script that's associated with the keyframe. And it was this amazing thing where you were writing text and then you would see language being turned into movements. And when I was a really young kid, I remember my mom signed me up for a class where I learned logo. So it was this kind of like old school thing with a turtle, and you tell the turtle like turn 10 degrees and go 20 pixels, and like turn 30 degrees and go 50 pixels. And it was like, I was really young, but I remember that, like, kind of the magic of that, like taking language and turning it into movement. And then here was this tool that was connected to this thing that I had experienced as a young child. And for me, it was so beautiful. And then also there were these people sharing code. So it was not only the tool, but also the community. And there were, folks like Joshua Davis and Amit Pataru and James Patterson, and just that kind of Flash, whatever, that Flash creative coding community. You would see like Yuka Nakamura doing this crazy interfaces, and and it was so vibrant. It was so interesting, and I fell in love. Like, I was really hooked, and I said, okay, I want to learn this. And it was, I went to graduate school. So the economy crashed. We had no, we were really busy at the studio, then we had no work. And I went to Parsons. And I was applying to design schools. I was applying to like proper graphic design, graduate schools like Parsons, SVA, Pratt, like all of these programs. But the programs that I was getting accepted to were these experimental design and technology programs that were really weird, really like, you couldn't tell exactly what they were. They were not like, masters in graphic design programs. And I still, when I was applying and when I started, I thought, okay, I'm going to learn proper design. And so at that time I was reading, all of this kind of history of graphic design and books by Ellen Lupton and Stephen Heller and all of this kind of design language. But when I went to Parsons, there were two types of, so I was accepted to Parsons. There's a design technology program, and there's two types of classes. There's classes which are fake work where you're building a portfolio, and then classes which are extremely weird stuff, just experimental, strange classes. And I hated the fake work classes, and I love the experimental weird stuff. And there is when I met Golan Levin, who was one of my professors. He was a graduate from MIT, from the Media Lab. And Golan introduced me to a lot of things, and we started to collaborate after I graduated and start to work together. And I graduated in 2002, so we had 4 years. When you saw us, that was in 2006. But from the moment I graduated from Parsons, he and I were working together and doing projects at Ars Electronica and creating installations and traveling and so on. So I sort of fell into media art through graduate school. I didn't know that this was a career, but then I kind of found my way in that direction.
So looking at this kind of journey that you have been doing through different, persons that have been influenced your work, and do you have a specific moment or person, like for example, I just shared for me, I can share that moment of off, the closing. That completely blew my mind. And another moment that I always share is the moment that I went to Pompeu Fabra University to study something about art and video, but my first visit was to see Sergi Jorda, who was playing an instrument called the rack table, who later heard. So for me, those are kind of specific moments that change some cables in my brain and say
I mean, it was definitely for me the John Maida book Designed by Numbers, which I can't remember how I was introduced to this, but I remember just the kind of magic. So I was really interested in computation. I was going to the bookstore and I would hang out in the computer section of the bookstore, but it was really like these terrible books like learn C++ in 21 days, learn Java. It's very technical and very just like how to do this, how to do this, how to do this. And you pick up the Design by Numbers, and it's so different. It's such a different book, because Maida is talking about why. He's not talking about how, he's talking about why. And for me, that was, that was a doorway. That was a door opening or a window opening or something that, I was excited about this medium, but these books were not speaking to me like to my heart or my soul. And then you pick up this book and it's like paragraphs about randomness, and what does randomness mean, and what does it feel like, and not like how do you use a pseudo random number generator, but just what's the meaning of it. And for me, that was really special and magical. And then it was coming face to face with artworks. So seeing the Nancy Burson exhibition in New York, and she's an artist that works with computational photography, or Jason Salavon. There was a show called Bitstreams at the Whitney in 2001. And for me, that was just seeing this side of media art that I didn't know about, and also I think it's the serendipity. You go to a museum and you think you're going to see one thing, and you turn the corner and you see something completely different. And it's that moment of just accidental discovery, and for me, when I saw there is this artwork by Jason Salavon, which it's basically the movie Titanic, but every frame of the film is turned into a single pixel of color. So you can read the movie from top left corner to the bottom right corner, this movie, but translated into one image. And for me, it was so really amazing to think that you could take data and transform it in this way, and that there was a story there, and if you knew the movie Titanic, you'd be like, oh, this is the inside section, and this is the snow, and this is that you could really read the image, and the image would tell you something about the story. And for me, that was really profound.
And during this kind of discovery that you have been that has been guiding your journey through art computation, you also have been, saying something about poetry computation. And
Mhm.
I want you to share with us, for you, what is poetry computation?
Yeah.
Poetry computation, and when was that specific moment that you decided that poetry computation is something that you want to go, deep
Yeah.
with?
Yeah. I mean, so that I guess the field, the generally, like if you say like what is the field, you would say creative coding, right? If you say like what do you do, what is the profession, or what is the field or genre, is creative coding. But I always felt like creative coding is a very strange term, because it's like, what does, I don't know, are there other types of coding that are not creative? If you don't have visual output, or you're doing, coding for a bank or a website or a database, is that not creative coding? And just like, is there another way to use language to describe what we're doing? And part of this was because we were starting school, and we wanted to figure out, a provocative term that would set the kind of tone of the school. So did a lot of brainstorming and came up with poetic computation. And the idea here is celebrating poetry. That actually, it's not like the job is not coding, the job is making poetry. And I think this is a really interesting distinction, and something worth talking about or thinking about, which is oftentimes as an artist that works with technology, you have technology first projects where the art is kind of tacked on, where it's like, okay, I'm interested in machine learning, and then I'm going to find an artistic approach with it. Or you have artistic projects, or projects that are driven by poetry or art, that the technology is in service of. And when I think about these phrases like creative coding or poetic computation, the challenge is always, how do you celebrate art first? How do you celebrate projects that are led by art, that are driven by art or artistic concerns, design concerns, and not technology first?
And it's interesting that what you're saying, because in our case, in our studio, that part of art, it's our R&D part of our process. Like, and actually, like, we're known in some of the world for installations, not for client projects, but for art projects. And
Mhm.
what doesn't know is that we don't do any money out of those projects in our case, and also kind of experiment there without experimenting with a client project. So that's kind of like seeing art in a way to kind of like how do you say, like a big laboratory or something like.
Mhm. Yeah.
When you work, when you do these experiments, because I don't know if, I mean, probably the guys who are seeing this webinar know that you're posting, an experiment very, very, very often, like
Yeah.
or sometimes more, no, like,
Yeah.
and and I wonder, like, what is your process about, creating so many iterations? Because like, how is that possible in your creative process? Like, I don't know if you can talk a bit more about this.
Sure. So I post sketches on Instagram. I post things on Twitter, and really it's like a kind of public diary, that these are my creative output, where I'm trying to make something every day. And I'm not religious about it, so I'll skip some days if I just don't feel right, or if I'm traveling. It's not. Some people are very, sensitive about that. I don't think about it in that way, but I just think it should be. It's part of my practice now. And a lot of what I'm doing is iteration, which is basically taking the same sketch or idea and saying, what if I change this? What if I change this? What if I change this? And code is such a great medium for that. So if you're basically creating these graphical forms that are parametric, that are defined by numbers. And so you can take a number and you can adjust it and make it larger, make it smaller. And these numbers relate to each other, and they're not linear. They're not always linear, the relationships. And so what I love is just kind of like, I think most people think of the practice as like typing. Like if you think like, oh, I'm gonna, write code to make art, that I'm just like typing, typing, typing. But actually, a lot of it is just changing numbers, adjusting, adjusting, adjusting. And I feel like it's not dissimilar to if you're a musician and you're working with synthesizers and you're just like tuning and finding the, like playing in the parameter space and trying to come up with something new. And I think for me, always the challenge is, what is the smallest thing that I can do that leads to something new? What is the tiniest change? Can I take something from yesterday and just, how can I surprise myself? And those changes involve, maybe I'm extruding something or rotating it or revolving it or drawing it 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times, and just want to see how it can tell me something new.
And I wonder if those changes kind of like drives you into something, like a wave, like you're like swimming, and
Yeah.
then floating in this, like, hey, I found this, and then you're going that way, and then you go deep.
Yeah.
Is there a moment where you say like, oh, I'm just tired of this experimentation?
Totally.
Yeah, go the other way around.
That's a really interesting way to describe it. I never thought about it like that, but I do like the idea of waves, which is also sometimes I feel like it's really quiet and I'm discovering nothing new. And then sometimes it'll be like a new algorithm or a new approach. And then it's like I'm surfing. Like there'll be some days where I'll post 3 things or 4 things, or, I just can't stop sharing because I'm so excited about it. And those feel like surfing. I think about it more, or the way I like to describe it is that you're sort of wandering around on like a city in the dark. And it's a little bit like, you're like, oh, should I, at every intersection, you're like, should I go straight or should I go left or should I go right? And you have this decision, constant decision. Should I go forward? Should I turn left? Should I turn right? And sometimes you wind up in a new neighborhood that you've never seen before. So it's exciting. So you'll kind of circle around and see like, what's here, what's here, what's here. But sometimes you'll turn the corner and you'll be like, oh, okay, I shouldn't be here. Like this doesn't feel right, or I feel uncomfortable. And then it's actually like you want to go back to something that you know. You want to go back to some territory that's comfortable. And I do think that is the movement from comfort to discomfort is really important. That you need to have your creative practice, you need to have those moments of discomfort where you are lost, where you feel uncomfortable, or you're trying something and you don't know how to do it. It's not. And then you need those moments of comfort where you say like, oh, okay, for me, it's these, I have these territories that I will always go back to, whether it's blobs or this sort of curving line or this kind of, spaces that rearrange themselves. And I know I'm safe there. So I'll go back there and I'll iterate, and then I'll move from kind of comfort to discomfort and back to comfort.
And it's funny because, I've been trying, for me, I do experiments as well in my own comfort zone as well. And then I tried kind of like that you're describing right now, like you have this uncomfortable moment that you most have. And when you're there, I mean, like, when do you decide that what you're doing is ready to share? Like, when do you say like, okay, yeah, maybe I share? Is it something that for you say like, I just have to share it because I have to share it, or is it something like
I think a little bit. So, I'm sketching and just taking screenshot, and I have this folder. I have one folder called Everyday, which is everything goes into, and then I feel it's a little bit like a photographer. Like if you're a wildlife photographer, you go out into the nature and you take a bunch of photographs, and then you look at them and you'll say like, this one is the best, right? I've taken 20 photographs, but this one tells me something, about what I'm seeing. And I feel the same way, which is I'm building these things which I don't totally understand, and I'm trying to document them and then figure out like, what is the thing that I've captured that says the best, that explains this the best, and that might be taking a video and trimming it and finding the right moment, and and making aesthetic decisions. Really, like, kind of, that's where you edit. You have all these kind of captures, but how do you find the right thing and how do you express it? And oftentimes I post things when I feel surprised. So if I'm kind of like coding and I'm changing, and I feel surprised, then I'll post it. Like if it excites me, or if it feels like, oh, okay, I've discovered something new, or I feel that this is really different than the previous thing, I will post it. But a lot of it is about intuition.
Cool. And can you share with us some of your work right now? Like,
Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to. And then please ask questions.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna like compile all those questions at the end. And
Yeah.
in Facebook as well, please, you can start also making some questions. So I'm here monitoring. So please feel free to ask questions.
Yeah. All right. So I have a bunch of stuff, but I will show. I'll show like a little bit of introduction, and then I'll poke around this deck.
I love the title of your keynote.
Yeah, drawing about space school. So I always show this photo. This is what I used to look like. I probably looked like this. I don't know when we met it. No, I didn't look like this when we met at Hangar, but this is what I look like in.
When we met, you were the PC guy.
Yeah, I was definitely the PC guy. But this is what I was talking about before. If you know, you know. Like this was the real deal. I started with Flash 4.0, so it was like early ActionScript. I've done a lot of projects, and I won't show that much right now, but one thing that I'm really proud of is this project called the iWriter. And this is a collaboration between myself and 4 other artists, Theo Watson, Chris Segru, Evan Roth, and James Potterly. And we worked with a 6th artist named Tempt. And Tempt is an old school graffiti artist, and he is paralyzed. He has a disease called ALS. And we went out to meet him, and we designed an eye tracking system so that he could draw graffiti with his eye movements. So kind of taking the movement of the eye, because he's physically paralyzed, and using it to draw graffiti. This is a project that I did a while ago with Toyota. Toyota has these small smart cars, and people think you can't drive them quickly. And we put colored dots on the car, and we had a camera from above, and we tracked the colored dots and made a font completely out of driving. And this is an installation in New Zealand where we took people's bodies. And most building projection, you see kind of 3D effects where you see the building fall apart and come back together. And here we took you and turned you into a kind of monster, 4 or 5 stories high. And a lot of times I found myself doing extremely random stuff. So this is my friend Daito Manabe, and the 2 of us were collaborating, and this is in Belgrade in a hotel lobby. At like 2 a.m. we were just experimenting with face tracking and getting data from the face. Sorry?
This is story, Zach, about the thing that we were talking before. We were like, we have a friend in common, which is Arturo Castro. Mm-hmm. Arturo was saying like, I never, been close to anyone who are so obsessed about coding as Zach, as Daito together, like those insane, like doing all this coding, and like I'm a hard code, but those are way other level.
It's funny. And then I show like one. So this was like tracking the movement of the face and then projecting on the face. And then this is a performance. This is what you were talking about with Golan, where Golan and I did this performance with the overhead projector. So taking the kind of projector that your math professor would write notes on, and so basically an analog light source, and then combining it with a digital projector to create almost a hybrid of both analog and digital light. So as you make forms and you drop them, they and then I helped start the school called the School for Poetic Computation. I'm also a professor now at MIT Media Lab, so I have almost kind of two teaching practices. So I teach in New York at the SFPC, the School for Poetic Computation, and I'm starting a school or a group in MIT at the Media Lab called Future Sketches, which I'm happy to talk about. And just to go back to this notion of poetic computation, we really want to celebrate poetry rather than coding. So trying to put the art first. And the word poetry, if you're in like the technology world, you always talk about demo, like making a demo. At MIT, it's called demo or die. That's the kind of motto. But the word demo very easily can become the word poem. So if you rearrange the letters, you can go from making demos to making poems. And poetry is always in the back of the bookstore. So you always have to go, it's never in the front of the bookstore. You have to go to the back of the bookstore. But there you'll find these kind of thin books that are low budget and self-published and independent publishers. They are full of people that are trying to use the right words in the right order to express what it means to be human and alive. And I try to write poems through movement and through code, and really focusing on how motion can create emotion when I'm making these sketches. And a lot of times they're very simple. They start with something like a blob shape and just say, what would happen if it expands and contracts, and how would I color it, and how would I shade it? And I'm quite interested in 3D forms that feel like 2D, and 2D that feels like 3D, slightly ambiguous or slightly flat, where your brain has to do a bit of work to understand what you're looking at. And this is a sketch that I made after Trump was elected. And I felt this really I felt like we were living in a cartoon universe. And I felt really deeply unhappy about the political situation and really happy about the New Year's. And I was trying to express this kind of confusion of being happy and unhappy at the same time. Oftentimes the sketches are just really random. Like I had figured out how to track my fingertips, and then I found the 1,000 most common words in the English alphabet, in the English language, and I just connected them to my finger. So as you're almost using your body to explore a kind of computational system. Like you have information, and can you use your body to move through that information? As a designer, I always feel I never know what font to use. So this is loading every font on my hard drive. So rather than picking one font, this is loading all of them and drawing them all on top of each other. And there's something really beautiful. So this is like every font on my hard drive cycling through the number 5, or through these numbers, and sorted by size, so it's getting thinner and then gets thicker again. And the thing that I find so amazing about this, like this kind of, I'm just gonna pause it for a second, is that all of these numbers, they're different aesthetic decisions, right? They're different, there's little choices, like should I make this thicker or thinner? Should I pull this direction or not? And what I love is just seeing, you can see all of this like choice after choice after choice. And I feel it's a good way of describing when I'm coding, it's just, it's always like these, choice after choice after choice. It's more every zero, or every zero on my hard drive. I want to show 2 drawing projects, and then I'm gonna happy to take some questions. One is, this is a project called Inkspace. So this is a drawing tool for Android, where when you draw, it's using your phone, but it uses the accelerometer of your phone. So as you rotate your phone, your drawing moves in 3D. So essentially you can draw something, but then as you rotate, you'll see the drawing kind of move and translate in 3 dimensions. Using a flat 2D surface, but turning it into a 3D drawing. And what I love about making these kinds of projects, like something like this one is called Inkspace, is that you put it out there and people make all kinds of drawings, and sometimes very like childish, like, silly faces. But then you'll see, like, I love this. I really love these sorts of things. There was this bird that this woman in South Korea drew, and I don't know how she drew it. And for me, there's something like just so beautiful about seeing something like that. Last thing is this project called Landlines, and this is a project that I did with Google where they had these satellite photographs from around the world, and they were looking for an interesting way of exploring them. And so I built a tool where when you draw, if you draw a curve, it finds that curve somewhere in the world. So if you draw, you know, a hook, it'll find a hook. If you draw a straight line, it'll find a straight line. If you draw a triangle, it'll find a triangle or a rectangle. And I love projects like this because they're about using your body to explore a computational system, using gesture, something, you know, we write our names all day, but can you use the body to, you know, access information in a new way? It's something that you understand and it's so intuitive, and can we use it in an expressive way? And a lot of times the projects have this very pretty front end, but then there's a lot of work on the back end, and science and data science and, you know, engineering, optimization, and so on that goes into a project like this. The second part of this project is connecting. So it finds the coastline and the highway and the dominant line in every image, and it connects them to create a kind of infinite landscape. So taking photographs from around the world and just where the lines, you know, meet up, connecting them. And so as you drag, it kind of keeps going and makes an infinite canvas.